Lecture 5. The Hero as Man of Letters. Johnson, Rousseau, Burns. May 19th, 1840. Hero gods, prophets, poets, priests, are forms of heroism that belong to the old ages, make their appearance in the remotest times. Some of them have ceased to be possible long since, and cannot any more show themselves in this world. The hero as man of letters, again of which class we are to speak today, is altogether a product of these new ages, and so long as the wondrous art of writing, or ready writing, which we call printing, subsists, he may be expected to continue, as of the main forms of heroism for all future ages. He is, in various respects, a very singular phenomenon. He is new, I say. He has hardly lasted above a century in the world yet. Never till about 100 years ago was there seen any figure of a great soul living in that part of that anomalous manner, endeavouring to speak forth the inspiration that was in him by printed books, find places in subsistence, by what the world would please to give him for doing that. Much had been sold and bought, left to make his own bargain in the marketplace, but the inspired wisdom of a heroic soul never till then in that naked manner. He, with his copyrights and copy wrongs, in his squalid garret, in his rusty coat, ruling, for this is what he does, from his grave after death. Whole nations and generations, who would or would not give him bread while living, is a rather curious spectacle. Few shapes of heroism can be more unexpected. Alas, the hero from of old has had to cramp himself into strange shapes. The world knows not well at any time what to do with him, so foreign is his aspect in the world. It seems absurd to us that men, in their rude admiration, should take some wise great Odin for a god and worship him as such, some wise great Mahomet for one god inspired, and religiously follow his law for 12 centuries. But that is a wise great Johnson, a Burns, or Rousseau should be taken for some idle nondescript, extant in the world to amuse idleness, and have a few coins and applauses thrown him, that he might live thereby. This, perhaps, as before hinted, will one day seem a still absurder phases of things. Meanwhile, since it is the spiritual, always, that determines the material, this same man of letters, hero, must be regarded as our most important modern person. He, such as he may be, is the soul of all. What he teaches is the whole world will do, and what the whole world will make. The world's manner of dealing with him is the most significant feature of the world's general position. Looking well at his life, we may get a glance as deep as it readily possible for us into the life of those singular centuries which have produced him, in which we ourselves live and work. There are genuine men of letters, and not genuine. As in every case, there is a genuine and a spurious. If hero be taken to mean genuine, then I say the hero as man of letters will be found discharging a function for us which is ever honourable, ever the highest, and was once well known to be the highest. He is uttering forth in such a way as he has the inspired soul of him, all that a man in any case can do. I say inspired, for what we call originality, sincerity, genius, the heroic quality we have no good name for, signifies that. The hero is he who lives in the inward sphere of things, in the true, divine, and eternal, which exists always, unseen to most, under the temporary, trivial. His being is in that. He declares that abroad, by act or speech as it may be, in declaring himself abroad. His life, as we said before, is a piece of the everlasting heart of nature itself. All men's life is. But the weak, many know not the fact, and are untrue to it in most times, and the strong and few are strong, heroic, perennial, because it cannot be hidden from them. The man of letters, like every hero, is there to proclaim this in such sort as he can. Intrinsically, it is the same function which the old generations named a man prophet, priest, divinity for doing, which all manner of heroes by speech or by act are sent into the world to do. Fichte, the German philosopher, delivered some 40 years ago at Erlangen a highly remarkable course of lectures on this subject. Über das Wesen des Gelehrten, on the nature of literary man. Fichte, in conformity with the transcendental philosophy of which he was a distinguished teacher, declares first, that all things which we see or work with in this earth, especially we ourselves and all persons, are as a kind of vesture or sensuous appearance, that under all there lies as the essence of them what he calls the divine idea of the world. This is the reality which lies at the bottom of all appearance. The mass of men no such divine idea is recognizable in the world. They live merely, says Fichte, among the superficialities, practicalities, and shows of the world, not dreaming that there is anything divine under them. But the man of letters is sent hither specially that he may discern for himself and make manifest to us the same divine idea. In every new generation it will manifest itself in a new dialect, and he is there for the purpose of doing that. Such is Fichte's phraseology, with which we need not quarrel. It is his way of naming that I here by other words am striving imperfectly to name. There is at present no name for the unspeakable, divine significance, full of splendour, of wonder and terror, that lies in the being of every man and of everything, this presence of God who made every man and everything. Mahomet taught this in his dialect, Odin in his. It is the thing which all things in thinking hearts, in one dialect or another, are here to teach. Fichte calls the man of letters, therefore, a prophet, as he prefers to phrase it, a priest, continually unfolding the godlike to men. Men of letters are a perpetual priesthood from age to age, teaching all men that a God is still present in their life, and that all appearance, whatsoever we see in the world, is but a vesture of the divine idea of the world, for that which lies at the bottom of appearance. In the true literary man there is thus ever acknowledged, or not, by the world a sacredness. He is the light of the world's priest, guiding it like a sacred pillar of fire in its dark pilgrimage through the waste of time. Fichte discriminates with sharp zeal the true literary man, what we here call a hero, as man of letters, from the multitudes of faults, unheroic. Whoever lies not wholly in this divine idea, or living partially in it, struggles not, as for one God, to live wholly in it. He is, let him live where else he like, in what pomps and prosperities he like, no literary man. He is, says Fichte, a bungler, a stumper, or at best, if he belongs to prosaic provinces, he may be a hodman. Fichte even calls him elsewhere a non-entity, and has, in short, no mercy for him, no wish that he should continue happy among us. This is Fichte's notion of the man of letters. It means, in its own form, precisely what we here mean. So in this point of view, I consider that, for the last 100 years, by far the notablest of all literary men is Fichte's countryman, Goethe. To that man, too, in a strange way, there was given what we may call life in the divine idea of the world, vision of the inward divine mystery, and strangely out of his books, the world rises imaged once more as godlike, the workmanship and temple of a god, illuminated, not in fierce, impure fire splendour as of Mahomet, but in mild celestial radiance, really a prophecy in these most unprophetic times, to my mind by far the greatest, though one of the quietest, among all the great things that have come to pass in them. Our chosen specimen of the hero as literary man would be this Goethe, and it is what a very pleasant plan for us, and for me here, to discourse of this heroism, for I consider him to be a true hero, heroic in what he said and did, and perhaps still more in what he did not say and did not do. To me, a noble spectacle. A great heroic ancient man speaking and keeping silence as an ancient hero in the guise of a most modern, high-bred, high-cultivated man of letters. We have had no such spectacle, no man capable of affording such, for the last 150 years. But at present, such is the general state of knowledge about Goethe, it were worse than useless to attempt speaking of him in this case. Speak as I might, Goethe, to the great majority of you, would remain problematic, vague, no impression but a false one could be realized. Him we must leave to future times. Johnson, Burns, Rousseau, Three great figures from a prior time and from a far inferior set of circumstances will suit us better here. Three men of the 18th century. The conditions of their life far more resemble what those of ours still are in England than what Goethe's in Germany were. Alas, these men did not conquer like him. They fought bravely and fell. They were not heroic bringers of the light, but heroic seekers of it. They lived under the galling conditions, struggling as under mountains of impediment, and could not unfold themselves into clearness or victorious interpretation of that divine idea. It is rather the tombs of three literary heroes that I have to show you. There are the monumental heaps under which three spiritual giants lie buried. Very mournful, but also great and full of interest for us. We will linger by them for a while. Complaint is often made in these times that what we call disorganized condition of society, how ill many forces of society fulfill their work, how many powerful are seen to be working in a wasteful, chaotic, altogether unarranged manner. It is, too, just a complaint, as we all know. But perhaps if we look at this book of the writers and the writers of the books, we shall find here, as it were, the summary of all other disorganizations, a sort of heart from which and to which all of the confusion circulates in the world, considering what book writers do in the world, and what the world does with book writers, I should say. It is the most anomalous thing the world at present has to show. We should go into the sea far beyond sounding do we attempt to give an account of this. But we must glance at it for the sake of our subject. The worst element in life of these three literary heroes was that they found their business and position such a chaos. In the beaten road there is tolerable travelling, but there is sore work, and many have to perish fashioning a path through the impassable. Our pious fathers, feeling well what importance lay in the speaking of man to man and man to men, founded churches, made endowments, regulations. Everywhere in the civilized world there is a pulpit, environed with all the manner of complex, dignified appurtenances and furtherances, that therefrom a man with a tongue may, to best advantage, address his fellow men. They felt that this was the most important thing, that without this there would be no good thing. It is a right pious work, that of theirs, be beautiful to the world, and beautiful to behold. But now, with the art of writing, the art of printing, total changes come over that business. The writer of a book is not he a preacher, preaching not to his parish or to that, on this day or that, but to all men in all times and places? Surely it is of the last importance that he do his work right, whoever do it wrong, that the eye report not falsely, for then all other members are astray. Well, how he might do his work, whether he do it right or wrong, whether he do it at all, is a point which no man in the world has taken the pains to think of. To a certain shopkeeper trying to get some money for his books, if lucky, he is of some importance. To no other man of any. Whence he came, whether he is bound by what ways he arrived by, what he might be furthered on his discourse, no one asks. He is an accident in society. He wanders like a wild Ishmaelite in a world of which he is the spiritual light, either the guidance or the misguidance. Certainly the art of writing is the most miraculous of all things man has devised. Odin's runes were the first form of a work of a hero. Books, written words, are still miraculous runes, the latest form. In books lies the soul of the whole past time, the articulate, audible voice of the past, when the body and material substances have altogether vanished like a dream. Mighty fleets and armies, harbours and arsenals, vast cities, high domed, many engined. They are precious, great. What do they become? Agamemnon, the many Agamemnons, Pericles, and their Greece. All is gone now to some ruined fragments, dumb, mournful wrecks and blocks. But the books of Greece, their Greece, to every thinker, still very literally lives. can be called upon into life. No magic rune is stranger than a book. All that mankind has done, taught, gained or been, it is lying as in magic preservation in the pages of books. They are the chosen possession of men. Do not books still accomplish miracles, as runes were fabled to do? They persuade men. Not the wretchedest circulating library novel, which foolish girls thumb and cone in remote villages, but will help to regulate the actual practical weddings and households of those foolish girls. So Celia felt, so Clifford acted. The foolish theorem of life, stamped onto those young brains, comes out as a solid practice one day. Consider whether any rune in the wildest imagination of mythologists ever did such wonders as, on the actual firm earth, some books have done. What built St. Paul's Cathedral? Look at the heart of the matter. It was that divine Hebrew book, the word partly of the man Moses, an outlaw tending his Midianitish herds 4,000 years ago in the wilderness of Sinai. It is the strangest of things, yet nothing is truer. With the art of writing, of which printing is a simple and inevitable and comparatively insignificant corollary, the true reign of miracles for mankind is commenced. It related with a wondrous now contiguity and perpetual closeness the past and distance, while the present in time and place, all times and all places with their and this are actual here and now. All things were altered for men, all modes of important work of men, teaching, preaching, governing, and all else. To look at teaching, for instance, universities are a notable, respectable product of the modern age. Their existence, too, is modified, at the very basis of it, by the existence of books. Universities arose while there were yet no books procurable, while a man, for a single book, had to give an estate of land. That, in those circumstances, when a man had some knowledge to communicate, he should do it by gathering the learners around him face to face, was a necessity for him. If you wanted to know what Abelard knew, you must go and listen to Abelard. Thousands, as many 30,000, went to hear Abelard in that metaphysical theology of his. And now, for any other teacher who had something of his own to teach, there was a great convenience opened. So many thousand eager to learn were already assembled yonder. Of all places, the best place for him was that. For any third teacher, it was better still, and grew ever the better, the more teachers there came. It only needed now that the king took notice of this new phenomenon, combined or agglomerated the various schools into one school, gave it edifices, privileges, encouragements, and named it Universitas, or School of All Sciences. The University of Paris, in its essential characters, was there, the model of all subsequent universities, which, down even to these days, for 6 centuries now, have gone on to found themselves. Such, I conceive, was the origin of universities. It is clear, however, with this simple circumstance facility of getting books, the whole conditions of the business from top to bottom were changed. Once invent printing, you metamorphed all universities or superseded them. The teacher needed not now to gather men personally around him, that he might speak to them what he knew, print it in a book, and all learners far and wide for a trifle had it each at his own fireside much more effectually to learn it. Doubtless there is still peculiar virtue in speech. Even writers of books may still, in some circumstances, find it convenient to speak also. Witness our present meeting here. There is, one would say, and must ever remain while man has a tongue, a distinct province for speech as well as for writing and printing. In regard to all things this must remain, to universities among others, but the limits of the two have nowhere yet been pointed out, ascertained, much less put in practice. The university, which would completely take in that great new fact of the existence of printed books, stand in a clear footing in the 19th century as the Paris one did in the 13th, has not yet come into existence. If we think of it, all that a university or final highest school can do for us is still but what the first school began doing. Teach us to read. We learn to read in various languages, in various sciences. We learn the alphabet and letters of all manner of books. But the place where we are to get knowledge, even theoretic knowledge, is the books themselves. It depends on what we read. After all manner of professors have done their best for us, the true university of these days is a collection of books. But the church itself, as I hinted already, is changed in its preaching and its working by the introduction of books. The church is the working, recognized union of our priests or prophets, of those, or by those who, by wise teaching, guide us the souls of men. While there was no writing, even while there was no easy writing or printing, the preaching of the voice was the natural sole method of performing this. But now with books, he that can write a true book to persuade England is not he, the bishop and archbishop, the primate of England, and of all England? Many a time, I say, the writers of newspapers, pamphlets, poems, books, these are the real working effective church of a modern country. Nay, not only our preaching, but even our worship is not too accomplished by means of printed books. The noble sentiment which a gifted soul has clothed for us in the melodious words which brings melody into our hearts is not the essentially, if we will understand it, the nature of worship. There are many in all countries who, in this confused time, have no other method of worship. He who in any way shows us the better that he knew before than the lily in the fields is beautiful, does he not show us that an effluence of the fountain of all beauty, as the handwriting made visible there, the great maker of the universe? He has sung for us. Might us sing with him? A little verse of a sacred psalm. Essentially so. How much more he who sings, who says, or in any way brings home to our heart the noble doings, feelings, darings, and endurances of a brother man. He has verily touched our hearts as with a live coal from the altar. Perhaps there is no worship more authentic. Literature, so far as literature is an apocalypse of nature, a revealing of the open secret, it may well be enough to be named in Fichte's style a continuous revelation, as of the godlike in the terrestrial uncommon. The godlike does ever, in very truth, endure there, is brought out, now in this dialect, now in that, with various degrees of clearness, all through the gifted singers and speakers are consciously or unconsciously doing so. The dark, stormful indignation of a Byron, so wayward and perverse, may have touches of it. Nay, the withered mockery of a French skeptic, his mockery of the false, a love and worship of the true. How much more the sphere harmony of a Shakespeare, of a Goethe, the cathedral, music of a Milton. There are something too, those humble and genuine lark notes of a Burns, skylark, starting from the humble furrow far overhead in the blue depths and singing to us so genuinely there. For all true singing is of the nature of worship, as indeed all true working may be said to be, whereof no singing is but the record and fit melodious representation to us, fragments of a real church liturgy and body of homilies, strangely disguised from the common eye, are to be found weltering that huge froth ocean of printed speech which we loosely call literature. Books are our church now. We're turning now to the government of men. Fit Nagamota, old Parliament, was a great thing. The affairs of the nation were there deliberated and decided, what we ought to do as a nation. But does not, though the name Parliament subsist, the parliamentary debate go on now, everywhere and all times, in a far more comprehensive way out of Parliament altogether? Burke said there were 3 estates in Parliament, but in the reporters' gallery yonder there is a 4th estate. More important far than they all. It is not a figure of speech or a witty saying. It is a literal fact, very momentous to us in these times. Literature is our Parliament too. Printing, which comes a necessity out of writing, I say often is equivalent to democracy. Invent writing, democracy is inevitable. Writing brings printing, brings universal, everyday extempore. Printing, as we see at present. Whoever can speak, speaking now to the whole nation, becomes a power, a branch of government, with inalienable weight in lawmaking, in all acts of authority. It matters not what rank he is, what revenues or garnitures. The requisite thing is that he have a tongue which others will listen to. This and nothing more is requisite. The nation is governed by all that has tongue in the nation. Democracy is virtually there. Add only that whatsoever power exists will have itself by and by organized, working secretly under bandages, obscurations, obstructions. It will never rest till it get work free, unencumbered, visible to all. Democracy, virtually extent, will insist on becoming palpably extent. On all sides, are we not driven to the conclusion that of the things which man can do or make here below, by far the most momentous, wonderful, and worthy are the things we call books? Those poor bits of rag paper with black ink on them, from the daily newspaper to the sacred Hebrew book. What have they not done? What are they not doing? For, indeed, whatever be the outward form, the timing, bits of paper, as we say, and black ink, is it not verily at bottom the highest act of man's faculty to produce a book? It is the thought of man, the true thaumaturgic virtue, by which a man works all things whatsoever. All that he does and brings to pass is the vesture of a thought. This London city, with all its houses, palaces, steam engines, cathedrals, huge, immeasurable traffic and tumult, what is it but a thought? But millions of thoughts made into one. A huge, immeasurable spirit of a thought embodied in brick, in iron, smoke, dust, palaces, parliaments, hackney coaches, Catherine docks, and the rest of it. Not a brick was made, but some man had to think of the making of that brick. The thing we call bits of paper with traces of black ink is the purest embodiment of a thought of man can have. No wonder it is, in all ways, the activist and noblest. All this of the importance, the supreme importance of the man of letters in modern society, and how the press is to a degree superseding the pulpit, the Senate, the Senatus Academicus, and much else have been admitted for a good while, and recognized often enough in late times with a sort of sentimental triumph and wonderment. It seems to me the sentimental by and by will have to give place for the practical. If men of letters are so incalculably influential, actually performing such work for us from age to age, and even from day to day, then I think we may conclude men of letters will not always wander like unrecognized, unregulated Ishmaelites among us. Whatsoever thing I have said above has virtual, unnoticed power will cast off its wrappages, bondages, and step forth one day with palpably articulated, universally visible power. That one man wear the clothes and take the wages of a function which is done by quite another. There can be no profit in this. This is not right. It is wrong. And yet, alas, the making of it is right. What a business for long times to come. Sure enough, this is what we call organization of the literary guild. It's still a great way off, encumbered with all manner of complexities. If you ask me, that were the best possible organization for the man of letters in modern society. The arrangement of furtherance and regulation grounded the most accurately on the actual facts of their position and of the world's position. I should beg to say that the problem far exceeded my faculty. It is not one man's faculty. It is the faculty of many successive men turned earnestly upon it, and that'll bring out even an approximate solution. What the best arrangements were, none of us could say. But if you ask, which is the worst, I answer, this which we have now, that chaos should sit umpire in it. This is the worst. To the best, or any good one, there is yet a long way. One remark I must not omit. that royal or parliamentary grants of money are by no means the chief thing wanted. To give our men of letters stipends, endowments, and all furtherance of cash will do little towards the business. On the whole, one is wary of hearing about the omnipotence of money. I will say rather that for a genuine man, it is no evil to be poor. That there ought to be literary men poor, to show whether they are genuine or not. Mendicant orders, bodies of good men doomed to beg, who are instituted in the Christian Church, a most unnatural and even necessary development of the spiritual Christianity. It was itself founded on poverty, on sorrow, contradiction, crucifixion, every species of worldly distress and degradation. We may say that he who has not known those things, and learned from them the priceless lessons they have to teach, has missed a good opportunity of schooling, to beg, to go barefoot, in coarse woolen cloak with a rope round your loins, and be despised of all the world, was no beautiful business, nor an honourable one in any eye, till the noblest of those who did so had made it honoured of some. Begging is not in our course at the present time, but for the rest of it, who will say that a Johnson is not perhaps the better for being poor? It is needful for him, at all rates, to know that outward profit, that success of any kind, is not the goal he has to aim at. Pride, vanity, ill-conditioned egoism, of all sorts, are bred in his heart, as in every heart, need above all to be cast out of his heart, to be, with whatever pangs, torn out of it, cast forth from it as a thing worthless. Byron, born rich, noble, made out even less than Burns, poor, plebeian. Who knows but in the same best possible organisation as yet far off, poverty may still enter as an important element? What if a man of letters is setting up to be a spiritual heroes, or still then, as they are not now, a kind of involuntary monastic order bound to this same ugly poverty, till they had tried what was in it too, till they had learned to make it to do for them? Money, in truth, can do much, but it cannot do all, and we must know the province of it, and confine it there, and even spurn it back when it wishes to get further. Besides, while the money furtherances, the proper season for them, the fitter signer of them, all settled, how is the Burns to be recognised that merits these? He must pass through the ordeal and prove himself. This ordeal, this wild welter of a chaos which is called literary life, this too is a kind of ordeal. There is clear truth in the idea that a struggle from the lower classes of society towards the upper regions and rewards of society must ever continue. Strong men are born there who ought to stand elsewhere than there. The manifold, inextricably complex, universal struggle of these constitutes and must constitute what is called the progress of a society. For men of letters, as for all sorts of men, how to regulate this struggle? There is the whole question: to leave it as it is, as the mercy of blind chance, a whirlwind of distracted atoms, one cancelling the other, one of the 1,000 arriving saved, 999 lost, by the way, your Royal Johnson, languishing inactive in garrets, or harnessed to the yoke of the printer cave, your Burns, dying, broken-hearted as a gauger, your Rousseau driven into mad exasperation, kindling French revolutions by his paradoxes. This, as we said, is clearly enough the worst regulation. The best, alas, is far from us. And yet there can be no doubt but it is coming, advancing on us as yet hidden in the bosom of the centuries. This is a prophecy one can risk. For so soon as men get to discern the importance of a thing, they do infallibly set about arranging it, facilitating, forwarding it, and rest not till, in some approximate degree, they have accomplished that. I say of all priesthoods, aristocracies, governing classes at present extent in the world, there is no class comparable for importance to that priesthood of the writers of books. That is a fact which he who runs may read, and draw inferences from. Literature will take care of itself, answered Mr. Pitt, when applied to for some help for Burns. Yes, adds Mr. Southey, it will take care of itself, and of you too, if you do not look to it. The result of the individual man of letters is not the momentous one, but they are individuals, an infinitesimal fraction of the great body. They can struggle on and live, or else die, as they have been wont. But it deeply concerns the whole society, whether it will set its lights on high places, to walk thereby, or trample it under foot, and scatter it in all ways of wild waste, not without conflagration as heretofore. Light is the one thing wanted for the world. Put wisdom in the head of the world will fight its battle victoriously, and be the best world man can make it. I called this anomaly of a disorganic literary class the heart of all other anomalies, at once product and parent. Some good arrangement for that would be as the punctum saliens of a new vitality and just arrangement for all. Already in some European countries, in France and Prussia, one traces some beginnings of an arrangement for the literary class, indicating the gradual possibility of such. I believe that it is possible, that it will have to be possible. By far the most interesting fact I hear about the Chinese is one in which we cannot arrive at clearness, but which excites endless curiosity, even in the dim state, this namely, that they do attempt to make their men of letters their governors. It would be rash to say one understood how this was done, or with what degree of success it was done. All things must be very unsuccessful. All such things, in any case. Yet a small degree of success is precious, the very attempt how precious. There does seem to be, all over China, a more or less active search everywhere to discover the men of talent that grow up in the young generation. Schools there are for everyone. A foolish sort of training, yet still a sort. The youths who distinguish themselves in the lower school are promoted into the favourable stations in the higher, that they may still distinguish themselves more. Forward and forward. It appears to be out of those that the official persons and incipient governors are taken. They are whom they try first whether they can govern or not. Surely the best hope, for they are the men that have already shown intellect. Try them. They have not governed or administered as yet. Perhaps they cannot. There is no doubt that they have some understanding, without which no man can. Neither is the understanding a tool, as we are too apt to figure. It is a hand which can handle any tool. Try these men. They are of all others the best worth trying. Surely there is no kind of government, constitution, revolution, social apparatus, or arrangement that I know of in this world so promising to one's scientific curiosity as this. The man of intellect at the top of affairs. This is the aim of all constitutions and revolutions, if they have any aim. For the man of true intellect, as I assert and believe always, is the noble-hearted man withal, the true, just, humane, valiant man. Get him for governor. All is got. Fail to get him, though you had constitutions plentiful as blackberries and a parliament in every village, there is nothing yet got. These things look strange, truly, and are not such as we commonly speculate upon. But we are fallen into strange times. These things will require to be speculated upon, to be rendered practicable, to be in some way put in practice. These and many others. On all hands of us there is the announcement, audible enough, that the old empire of routine has ended. That to say a thing has long been is no reason for continuing it to be. Things which have been fallen into decay are fallen into incompetence. Large masses of mankind in every society of our Europe are no longer capable of living at all by the things which have been. Millions of men can no longer, by their utmost exertion, gain food for themselves, and the third man of 6 weeks each year is short of third-rate potatoes. The things which have been must decidedly prepare to alter themselves. I will now quit this organization of men of letters. Alas, the evil that is pressed heaviest on the literary heroes of ours was not the want of organization for men of letters, but a far deeper one, out of which, indeed, this and so many other veils for this literary man, and for all men, had, as from their fountain, taken rise, that our hero as man of letters had to travel, without highway, companionless, through an inorganic chaos, and to leave his own life and faculty lying there as a partial contribution towards pushing some highway through it. This had not his faculty itself been so perverted and paralyzed. He might have put up with it, might have considered it to be common lot of heroes. His fatal misery was the spiritual paralysis, so we may name it, of the age in which his life lay, whereby his life too, do what he might, was half paralyzed. The 18th was a skeptical century, in which little word there is a whole Pandora's box of miseries. Skepticism means not intellectual doubt alone, but moral doubt. All sorts of infidelity, insincerity, spiritual paralysis. Perhaps in few centuries that one could specify since the world began was a life of heroism more difficult for a man. That was not an age of faith, an age of heroes. The very possibility of heroism had been, as it were, formally abnegated in the minds of all. Heroism was gone forever. Triviality, formalism, commonplace were come forever. The age of miracles had been, or perhaps had not been, but it was not any longer. An effete world, wherein wonder, greatness, godhood could not now dwell in one word, a godless word. How mean, dwarfish are their ways of thinking in this time, compared not with the Christian Shakespeares and Miltons, but with the old pagan skulls, with any species of believing men. The living tree, Yggdrasil, with the melodious prophetic weaving of its world-wide boughs, deep-rooted as Hela, has died out into the clanking of a world machine. Tree and machine contrast these two things. I, for my share, declare the world to be no machine. I said it does not go by wheel and pinion, motives, self-interest, checks, balances. There is something far on it than the clank of spinning jennies and parliamentary majorities. And on the whole, that is not a machine at all. The old Norse heathen had a truer motion of God's world than these poor machine skeptics. The old heathen Norse were sincere men. But for these poor skeptics there was no sincerity, no truth. Half-truth, hearsay, was called truth. Truth, for most men, meant plausibility, to be measured by the number of votes you could get. They had lost any notion that sincerity was possible, or that sincerity was. How many plausibilities asking, with unaffected surprise and the air of offended virtue, "What, am I not sincere?" Spiritual paralysis, I say nothing left but a mechanical life, was the characteristic of that century. For the common man, unless happily he stood below his century and belonged to another prior one, it was impossible to be a believer, a hero. He lay buried, unconscious, under these baleful influences. To the strongest man, only with an infinite struggle and confusion was it possible to work himself half loose, and led, as it were, in an enchanted, most tragical way, a spiritual death in life, and be a half hero. Skepticism is the name we give to all this. As the chief symptom, as the chief origin of all this. And concerning which, so much were to be said, it would takes so many discourses, not a small fraction of one discourse, to state that what one feels about the 18th century and its ways. And indeed, this, like of this which we now call skepticism, is precisely the black malady and life foe against which all teaching and discoursing since man's life began has directed itself. The battle against unbelief. Is the never-ending battle. Neither is it in the way of crimination that one would wish to speak. Skepticism for that century we must consider as the decay of old ways. The old ways of believing the preparation afar off for newer and better, wider ways, an inevitable thing. We will not blame men for it. We will lament their hard fate. We will still understand that destruction of old forms is not destruction of everlasting substances. That skepticism, as sorrowful and hateful as we see it, is not an end but a beginning. The other day, speaking without prior purpose that way of Bentham's theory of man and of life, I chanced to call it a more beggarly one than Mahomet's. I am bound to say now that when once uttered such was my deliberate opinion. Not that one would mean offence against the man Jeremy Bentham, or those who respect and believe him. Bentham himself, and even the creed of Bentham, seems to me comparatively worthy of praise. It is a determinate being, with all the world, in a cowardly half-and-half manner, was tending to be. Let us have the crisis. We shall either have death or the cure. I have this gross steam engine utilitarianism, an approach towards new faith. It was a laying down of cant, a saying to oneself, well then, this world is a dead iron machine, the god of it gravitation and self-hunger. Let us see what, by checking and balancing and good adjustment of tooth and pinion, can be made of it. Benthamism has something complete, manful in such fearless committal of itself to what it finds true. You may call it heroic, though a heroism with its eyes put out. It is the culminating point and fearless ultimatum of what lay in the half-and-half state pervading man's whole existence in that 18th century. It seems to me all deniers of godhood and all lip believers of it are bound to be Benthamites, if they have courage and honesty. Benthamism is an eyeless heroism. The human species, like a hapless, blinded Samson grinding in the Philistine mill, clasps convulsively the pillars of its mill, brings huge ruin down, but ultimately deliverance withal. Of Bentham I meant to say no harm. But this I do say, and would wish all men to know and lay to heart, that he who discerns nothing but mechanism in the universe has in the fatalist way missed the secret of the universe altogether. That all godhood should vanish out of men's conception of this universe seems to me precisely the most brutal error. I will not disparage heathenism by calling it heathen error that men could fall into. It's not true. It is false at the very heart of it. A man who thinks so will think wrong about all things in the world. This original sin will vitiate all other conclusions he can form. One might call it the most lamentable of delusions. Not forgetting witchcraft itself. Witchcraft worshipped at least a living devil, but the worships of a dead iron devil, no god, not even a devil. Whatsoever is noble, divine, inspired, drops thereby out of life. There remains everywhere in life a despicable caput mortuum, the mechanical hull, all soul fled out of it. How can a man act heroically? The doctrines of motives will teach him that it is, under more or less disguise, nothing but a wretched love of pleasure, fear of pain, that hunger of applause, of cash, of whatsoever victual it may be, is the ultimate fact of man's life. Atheism, in brief, which does not frightfully punish itself. The man, I say, is become spiritually a paralytic man. This godlike universe, a dead mechanical steam engine, all working by motives, checks, balances, and I know not what, wherein, as in the detestable belly of some Phalaris's bull. of his own contriving. He, the poor Phalaris, sits miserably dying. Their belief I define to be the healthy act of a man's mind. It is a mysterious, indescribable process, that of getting to believe, indescribable as all vital acts are. We have our mind given to us, not that it may cavil and argue, but that it may see into something, give us clear belief and understanding about something whereon we are then to proceed to act. Doubt, truly, is not itself a crime. Certainly we do not rush out, clutch up at the first thing we find, and straightway believe that. All manner of doubt, inquiry, skepsis, as it is named, about all manner of objects, dwelled in every reasonable mind. It is the mystic working of the mind and the object, and is getting out to know and to believe. Belief comes out of all of this. Above ground, like the tree from its hidden roots. But now, if, even on the common things, we require that a man keep his doubts silent and not babble of them, that they still, in some measure, become affirmations or denials, how much more in regard to the highest things impossible to speak of in worlds at all, that a man parade his doubt and get to imagine the debating and logic, which means that the very best manner of telling us your thought, your belief or disbelief about a thing, is the triumph of all true work of what intellect he has. Alas, this as if you should overturn the tree, and instead of green boughs, leaves, and fruits, show us ugly taloned roots turned up into the air, and no growth, only death, misery going on. For the skepticism, as I said, is not intellectual only. It is also moral. A chronic atrophy and disease for the whole soul. A man lives by believing something, not by debating and arguing about many things. A sad case for him is that all that he can manage is to believe what he can button into his pocket, and with one or other organ eat and digest. Lower than that he will not get. What we call those ages in which he gets so low, the mournfulest, sickest, and meanest of all ages. The world's heart is palsied, sick. He can, how can any limb of it be whole? Genuine acting ceases in all departments of this world's work. Dexterous similitude of acting begins. The world's wages are pocketed. The world's work is not done. Heroes have gone out. Quacks have come in. Accordingly, century since the end of the Roman world, which was also in time of skepticism, simulacra, and universal decadence, so abounds with quacks as that 18th. Consider them. Their tumid, sentimental vapouring about virtue, benevolence, the wretched quack squadron, Cagliostro at the head of them. Few men were without quackery. They had got to consider it a necessary ingredient and amalgam for truth. Chatham, our brave Chatham himself, comes down to the house, all wrapped and bandaged. He has crawled out in great bodily suffering, and so on. Forgets, says Walpole, that he is acting the sick man. In the fire of debate, snatches his arm from the sling, and erratically swings and brandishes it. Chatham himself lives the strangest mimetic life, half hero, half quack, all along. For indeed, the world is full of dupes, and you have to gain the world's suffrage. How the duties of the world will be done in that case, what quantities of error, which means failure, which means sorrow and misery, to some and to many, will gradually accumulate in all provinces of the world's business, we need not compute. It seems to me you lay your finger here on the heart of the world's maladies when you call it a sceptical world, an insincere world, a godless untruth of a world. It is out of this. I consider that the whole tribe of social pestilence, French revolutions, Chartisms, and what not, have derived their being. Their chief necessity is to be, and this must alter. Till this alter, nothing can be beneficially altered. My one hope of the world, my inexpugnable consolation in looking at the miseries of the world, is that this is altered. Here and there one does now find a man who knows, as of the old, that this world is a truth, and no plausibility and falsity, that he himself is alive, not dead or paralytic, and that the world is alive, instinct with godhood, beautiful and awful, even as in the beginning of days. One man, once knowing this, many men, all men, must by and by come to know it. It lies there, clear, for whosoever will take the spectacles off his eyes and honestly look to know. For such a man, the unbelieving century, with its unblessed products, is already past. A new century is already come. The old blessed products of performances as solid as they look are phantasms, separating speedily to vanish. This is the noisy, great-looking simulacrum with the whole world huzzing as it feels, as he can say, composedly stepping aside. Thou art not true. Thou art not extent, only semblant. Go thy way. Yes, hollow formalism, gross benthamism, and other unheroic, atheistic insincerity, they are visibly and even rapidly declining. An unbelieving 18th century is but an exception, such as now and then occurs. I prophesy that the world will once more become sincere, a believing world, many heroes in it, a heroic world. It will then be a victorious world, but never till then. Or indeed that, what of the world and its victories? Men speak too much about the world. Each one of us here, let the world go, how it will, be victorious or not victorious. He has not a life of his own to lead. One life with a gleam of time between two eternities, no second chance to us for evermore. It were well to us not to live as fools in simulacra, but as wise in realities. The world's being saved will not save us. Not for the world's being lost to destroy us. We should look to ourselves. There's great merit here in the duty of staying at home, and on the whole, to say truth. I never heard of the world's being saved in any other way. That mania of saving worlds is itself a piece of the 18th century with its windy sentimentalism. Let us not follow it too far. Saving the world. I will trust confidently to the maker of the world, and look a little at my own saving, which I am more competent to. In brief, for the world's sake, and for our own, we will rejoice greatly that skepticism, insincerity, mechanical atheism, with all their poison dews, are going, and as good as gone. Now, it was under such conditions, and those times of Johnson, that our men of letters had to live, times in which there was properly no truth in life. Old truth had fallen nigh dumb. The new lay yet hidden, not trying to speak. Man's life here below was a sincerity and fact, and would forever continue, such no new intimation. In that dusk of the world had yet dawned. No intimation. Not even any French Revolution, which we define to be a truth once more, though a truth clad in hellfire. How different was Luther's pilgrimage, with its assured goal, from the Johnsons, girt with mere traditions, suppositions, grown now incredible, unintelligible. Mahomet's formulas were of wood waxed and oil. It could be burnt out of one's way. Poor Johnson was far more difficult to burn. The strong man will ever find work, which means difficulty, pain, to the full measure of his strength. But to make out a victory in those circumstances of our poor hero as man of letters was perhaps more difficult than any. Not obstruction, disorganization, bookseller, Osborne, and fourpence halfpenny in a day, not this alone, but the light of his own soul was taken from him. No landmark on the earth, and alas, what is said to have no lodestar in heaven. We need not wonder at how none of those three men rose to victory. That they fought truly is the highest praise. With a mournful sympathy we will contemplate, if not three living victorious heroes, as I said, the tombs of three fallen heroes. They fell for us too, making a way for us. There are the mountains which they hurled abroad in their confused war of the giants, under which their strength and life spent, they now lie buried. I have already written of these three literary heroes expressly, or incidentally, what I suppose is known to most of you. It need not be spoken or written of for a second time. They concern us here as the singular prophets of that singular age, for such they virtually were, and the aspect they in their world exhibit under this point of view might lead us into the reflections enough. I call them all three genuine men or less, faithfully for most part unconsciously struggling to be genuine and plant themselves in the everlasting truth of things. This to a degree that eminently distinguishes them from the poor artificial mass of their contemporaries, and renders them worthy to be considered as speakers, in some measure, of the everlasting truth, as prophets in that age of theirs. By nature herself, a noble necessity was laid on them to be so. They were men of such magnitude that they could not live on unrealities. Clouds forth in, and all inanity gave way under them. There was no footing for them, but on firm earth, and no rest or regular motion for them, if they got not footing there. To a certain extent, they were sons of nature once more in an age of artifice. Once more, original men. As for Johnson, I have always considered him to be by nature one of our great English souls. A strong and noble man, so much left undeveloped in him to the last, in a kindlier element, what might have not been. Poet, priest, sovereign ruler, on the whole a man must not complain of his element, of his time, or the like. It is the thriftless work doing so. His time is bad. Well then, he is there to make it better. Johnson's youth was poor, isolated, hopeless, very miserable. Indeed, it did not and does not seem possible in any of the most favourable outward circumstances that Johnson's life could have been other than a painful one. The world might not have been more profitable in its work out of him, or less, but our effort against the world's work could never have been a light one. Johnson, and the nature of all events, had poor Johnson, and to go about his girt with continual hypochondria, physical and spiritual pain. Like a Hercules with a burning Nessus's shirt on him, which shoots in on him dull, incurable misery. Nessus's shirt not to be stripped off, which is his own natural skin. In this manner he had to live. Figure him there with his scrofulous diseases, with his great greedy heart, and his unspeakable chaos of thoughts, stalking, mournful as a stranger in this earth, eagerly devouring what spiritual thing he could come at. School languages, and other merely grammatical stuff, if there were nothing better. The largest soul that was in all England, and provision made for it by the fourpence halfpenny a day. Yet a giant invincible soul, a true man's. One remembers always there's a story of the shoes at Oxford. The rough, seamy-faced, raw-boned college servitor stalking about in winter season, with his shoes worn out, How the charitable gentleman commoner secretly places a new pair at his door, and the raw-boned servitor, lifting them up, looking at them near, with his dim eyes, with what his thoughts pitches them out of the window. Wet feet, mud, frost, hunger, or what you will, but not beggary. We cannot stand beggary. Rude, stubborn self-help here, a whole world of squalor, rudeness, confused misery, and want, yet of nobleness and manfulness withal. Yes, it is a type of a man's life, the pitching away of shoes. An original man, not a second-hand, borrowing or begging man. Let us stand on our own basis, at any rate, on such shoes as we ourselves can get, on frost and mud, if you will, but honestly on that. On the reality and substance which nature gives us, not on the semblance, on the thing she has given another than us. And yet, with all this rugged pride of manhood and self-help, there was the soul, and more tenderly affectionate, loyally submissive to what was really higher than he. Great souls are always loyally submissive, reverent to what is over them. Only small, mean souls are otherwise. I could not find a better proof of what I said the other day, that the sincere man was by nature the obedient man, that only in a world of heroes was there a loyal obedience to the heroic. The essence of originality is not the new. Johnson believed altogether in the old. He found in the old opinions credible for him, fit for him, and in a right heroic manner lived under them. It is well worthy study in the regard of that. For we are to say that Johnson was far other than mere man of words and formulas. He was a man of truths and facts. He stood by the old formulas. The happier was for him that he could do so stand, but in all formulas he could stand by. There needed to be the most genuine substance. Very curious how in that poor paper age, so barren, artificial, thick-quilted, with pedantries, hearsays, the great fact of the universe, glared in forever. Wonderful, indubitable, unspeakable, divine, infernal. Upon this man too. How he harmonized his formulas with it. How he managed it all under such circumstances. That is a thing worth seeing. A thing to be looked at with reverence, with pity, and with awe. The church of St. Clement Danes, where Johnson still worshipped in the era of Voltaire, is to me a venerable place. It was in virtue of sincerity, of his speaking still in some sort of heart of nature, that with the current artificial dialect, that Johnson was a prophet. Are not all dialects artificial? Artificial are the things that are not necessarily false. Not every true product of nature will infallibly shape itself. You may say all artificial things are, at the starting of them, true. What we call formulas are not in their origin bad, they are indispensably good. A formula is method, habitude, found wherever man is found. Formulas fashion themselves as paths do, as beaten highways leading towards some sacred or high object, whither many men are about. Consider it. One man, full of heartfelt, earnest impulse, finds out a way of doing somewhat. What of uttering his soul's reverence for that way of doing, that these are its footsteps, these are the beginnings of a path. And now see, the second man travels, naturally in the footsteps of his foregoer, as is the easiest method. In the footsteps of his foregoer, yet with improvements, with changes, sees them good. At all events, with enlargements, the path ever widening itself as more travel it, till at last there is a broad highway whereon the whole world may travel and drive, while there remains a city or shrine or any reality to drive to the farther end. The highway shall be right welcome. When the city is gone, we will forsake the highway. In this manner, all institutions, practices, things in the world have come into existence and gone out of existence. Formulas all begin by being full of substance. You may call them the skin, the articulation to shape into limbs and skin of a substance that is already there. They have not been there otherwise. Idols, as we said, are not idolatrous till they become doubtful, empty for the worshipper's heart. Much as we talk against formulas, I hope no one of us is ignorant with all of the high significance of true formulas. That they were and will ever be indispensable furniture of our habitation in the world. Mark, too, how little Johnson boasts of his sincerity. He has no suspicion of his being particularly sincere, of his being particularly anything. A hard-struggling, weary-hearted man, or a scholar, as he calls himself, trying hard to get some honest livelihood in the world, not to starve, but to live, without stealing. A noble unconsciousness is in him. He does not engrave truth on his watch seal. No, but he stands by truth, speaks by it, works and lives by it. Thus it ever is. Think of it once more. The man whom nature has appointed to do great things, first of all furnished with that openness to nature which renders him incapable of being insincere, to his large, open, deep feeling of heart, nature is a fact. All hearsay is hearsay. The unspeakable greatness of this mystery of life, let him acknowledge it or not, nay, even though he seem to forget it or deny it, is ever present to him, fearful and wonderful, on this hand and on that. He has a basis of sincerity, unrecognized, because never questioned or capable of question. Mirabeau, Mahomet, Cromwell, Napoleon, all the great men I have ever heard of have this as primary materiality of them. Innumerable commonplace men are debating, talking everywhere their commonplace doctrines, which they have learnt by logic, by rote, at second hand. To that kind of man, all is still nothing. He must have truth, truth which he feels to be true. How shall he stand otherwise? His whole soul, at all moments, in all ways, tells him that there is no standing. He is under the noble necessity of being true. Johnson's way of thinking about this world is not mine, any more than Mahomet's was, but I recognize the everlasting element of heart sincerity in both, and see with the pleasure how neither of them remains ineffectual. Neither of them is as chaff sown. In both of them is something which the seed field will grow. Johnson was a prophet to his people. He preached a gospel to them, as all like him always do. The highest gospel he preached may be described as a kind of moral prudence. In a world where much is to be done and little is to be known, see how you will do it. A thing well worth preaching. A world where there is much to be done and little to be known. Do not sink yourselves in the boundless, bottomless abysses of doubt, of wretched, God-forgetting unbelief. You are miserable then, powerless, mad. How could you do work at all? Such gospel Johnson preached and taught, coupled theoretically and practically with this other great gospel. Clear your mind of cant. Have no trade with cant. Stand on the cold mud and in the frosty weather, but let it be in your own real torn shoes. That will be the better for you, as Muhammad says. I call these two things joined together a great gospel, the greatest perhaps that was possible at that time. Johnson's writings, which won such currency and celebrity, are now, as it were, disowned by the young generation. It is not wonderful. Johnson's opinions are becoming fast obsolete, but his style of thinking and of living, we may hope, will never become obsolete. I find in Johnson's books the indisputablest traces of a great intellect and great heart, ever welcome under what was obstructions and perversions whatsoever. They are sincere words, those of his, and he means things by them. A wondrous buckram style, the best he could do to get them. A measured grandiloquence, stepping, or rather stalking along in a very solemn way, grown obsolete now, sometimes, or tumid sighs of phraseology, not in proportion of the contents of his style. But all of this we'll put up with. For the phraseology, tumid or not, always has something within it. So many beautiful styles in books win nothing in them. But a man is a malefactor to the world who writes such. They are the avoidable kind. Had Johnson left nothing but his dictionary, one might have traced their great intellect a genuine man. Looking to his clearness of definition, its general solidity, honesty, insight, and successful method, it may be called the best of all dictionaries. There is in it a kind of architectural nobleness. It stands there like a great, solid, square-built edifice, finished, symmetrically complete. You should judge that to be a true builder that did it. One word, in spite of our haste, must be granted to poor Bozzy. He passes for a mean, inflated, gluttonous creature, and was in so many senses. Yet the fact of his reverence for Johnson will ever remain noteworthy. The foolish, conceited Scotch laird, the most conceited man of his time, approaching in such awe-struck attitude to the great dutsy, irascible pedagogue in this mean garret there. It is a genuine reverence for excellence, a worship for heroes, at a time when neither heroes nor worship was surmised to exist. Heroes, it would seem, exist always in a certain worship of them. We will also take the liberty to deny altogether that the witty Frenchman, that no man is a hero to his valet de chambre, or if so, it is not the hero's blame but the valet's. That his soul, namely, is a mean valet soul. He expects his hero to advance in royal stage trappings, with measured step, trains borne behind him, trumpets standing before him. It should stand rather. No man can be a grand monarch to his valet de chambre. Strip your Louis XIV of his king gear, and that is left nothing but a poor forked radish, his head fantastically carved. Admirable, but no valet. The valet does not know a hero when he sees him. Alas, no. It requires a kind of hero to do that. And one of the world's wants, in this as in other senses, is for most part want of such. On the whole, shall we not say that Boswell's admiration was well bestowed, that he could have found no soul in all England so worthy of bending down before? Shall we not say of this great mournful Johnson that he guided his difficult, confused existence wisely? Led it well, like a right valiant man, the waste chaos of authorship by trade, that waste chaos of skepticism in religion and politics, in life theory and life practice, in his poverty, in his dust and dimness, with his sick body and the rusty coat. He made it do for him, like a brave man, not wholly without a lodestar in the eternal. He had a lodestar, as the brave all need to have. His eye on that. He could and would change his course for nothing in these confused vortices of the lower sea of time. To the spirit of lies, bearing death and hunger, he would in no wise strike his flag. Brave old Samuel, ultimus Romanorum. Of Rousseau and his heroism, I cannot say so much. He's not what I call a strong man, a morbid, excitable, spasmodic man. At best, intense rather than strong. He had not the talent of silence, an invaluable talent, which few Frenchmen, or indeed men of any sort of these times, excel in. The suffering man ought really to consume his own smoke. There is no good in emitting smoke till you have made it into fire, which, in the metaphorical sense, too, all smoke is capable of becoming. Rousseau has not depth or width, not calm force for difficulty, the first characteristic of true greatness. A fundamental mistake to call vehemence and rigidity strength. A man is not strong who takes convulsion fits, though 6 men cannot hold him then. He that can walk under the heaviest weight without staggering, he is the strong man. We need forever, especially in these loud shrieking days, to remind ourselves of that. A man who cannot hold his peace till the time come for speaking and acting is no right man. Poor Rousseau. His face, to me, is the expressive of him. A high but narrow contracted intensity in it, bony brows, deep, straight-set eyes, in which there is something bewildering looking, bewildered, peering with lynx eagerness. A face full of misery, even ignoble misery, and also of the antagonism against that something mean, plebeian there, redeemed only by intensity, the face of what is called a fanatic, sadly contracted hero. We name him here because, with all his drawbacks, and there are many, he has the first and chief characteristic of a hero. He is heartily in earnest. In earnest, if ever man was, as none of these French philosophers were. Nay, one would say of an earnestness too great for his otherwise sensitive, rather feeble nature, and which indeed in the end drove him into the strangest incoherences, almost delirations. There had come at last to be a kind of madness in him. His ideas possessed him like demons, hurried him so about, drove him over steep places. The fault and misery of Rousseau was that he easily named by a single word, egoism, which is indeed the source and summary of all his faults and miseries whatsoever. He had not perfected himself into victory over mere desire. A mean hunger in many sorts was still the motive and principle of him. I am afraid he was a very vain man, hungry for praises of men. You remember Genlis's experience of him. She took Jean-Jacques to the theatre, he bargaining for a strict incognito. Oh, he would not be seen there for the world. The curtain did happen nevertheless to be drawn aside. The pit recognized Jean-Jacques, but took no notice of him. He expressed the bitterness indignation, gloomed all evening, spake no other than surly words. The glib countess remained entirely convinced that his anger was not at being seen, but at not being applauded when seen. How the whole nature of the man is poisoned. Nothing but suspicion, self-isolation, fierce, moody ways. He could not live with anybody. A man of some rank from the country, who visited him often, and used to sit with him, expressing all reverence and affection for him, comes one day, finds Jean-Jacques there, full of sourest, unintelligible humour. "Monsieur," said Jean-Jacques, with flaming eyes, "I know why you come here. You come here to see what a poor life I lead, how little is in my poor pot that is boiling there. Well, look into the pot. There is half a pound of meat, 1 carrot, 3 onions, that is all. Now go and tell the world that, if you like, monsieur." Yeah, a man of this sort was far gone. The whole world got itself supplied with anecdotes for, like laughter, for a certain theatrical interest, from these perversions and contortions of poor Jean-Jacques. Alas, to him they were not laughing or theoretical, or even theatrical. To him, they were real. The contortions of a dying gladiator. The crowded amphitheatre looks on with entertainment, but the gladiator is in agonies and dying. And yet, this Rousseau, as we say, with his passionate appeals to mothers, with his contrast social, with his celebrations of nature, even of savage life and nature, did once more touch upon reality, struggle towards reality, was doing the function of a prophet of his time, as he could, and as the time could. Strangely, through all defacement, degradation, and most madness, there is in the inmost heart of poor Rousseau a spark of real heavenly fire. Once more, out of the element of that withered mocking, philosophism, skepticism, and persiflage, there has arisen in this man an irascible feeling of knowledge, and in this life of ours is true. Not a skepticism, theorem, or persiflage, but a fact, an awful reality. Nature made that revelation to him, had ordered him to speak it out. He got it spoken out, and if not well and clearly, then ill and dimly, as clearly as he could. Nay, what are all the errors and perversities of his, even those stealings of ribbons, aimless, confused miseries and vagabondisms, if we will interpret them kindly, but the blinking dazzlement of staggering to and fro of a man sent on an errand he is too weak for, by a path he cannot yet find. Men are strange, and led in strange ways. One should have tolerance for a man, hope of him, leave him to try. Yet what he will do, well, while life lasts, hope lasts for every man. Of Rousseau's literary talents, greatly celebrated still among his countrymen, I do not say much. His books, like himself, are what I call unhealthy, not the good sort of books. There is a sensuality in Rousseau. Combined with such an intellectual gift as his, it makes pictures of a certain gorgeous attractiveness, but they are not genuinely poetical. Not white sunlight, but something operatic, a kind of rose pink, artificial bedizenment. It is frequent, or rather it is universal, among the French since his time. Madame de Stael has something of it. Saint-Pierre, downwards and onwards and presenting astonishing convolutionary literary of desperation. That is everywhere abundant. That same rose pink. It's not the right hue. Look at Shakespeare, at a Goethe, even at a Walter Scott. He who has once seen into this has seen the difference of the true from the sham true, and will discriminate them ever afterwards. We had to observe in Johnson how much good a prophet, under all disadvantages and disorganizations, can accomplish for the world. In Rousseau, we are called to look rather at the fearful amount of evil which, under such disorganization, may accompany the good. Historically, it is a most pregnant spectacle, that of Rousseau. Banished into Paris garrets, in the gloomy company of his own thoughts and necessities there, driven from post to pillar, fretted, exasperated, till the heart of him went mad. He had grown to feel deeply that the world was not his friend, nor the world's law. It was expedient, if any way possible, that such a man should not have been set in flat hostility with the world. He could be cooped into garrets, laughed at as a maniac, left to starve like a wild beast in his cage, but he could not be hindered from setting the world on fire. The French Revolution found its evangelist in Rousseau. His semi-delirious speculations on the miseries of civilized life, the preferability of the savage to the civilized, and such like, helped well to produce a whole delirium in France generally. True, you may well ask, what could the world, the governors of the world, do with such a man? Difficult to say what the governors of the world could do with him. What he could do with them is unhappily clear. Guillotine. A great many of them. Enough now of Rousseau. It was a curious phenomenon in the withered, unbelieving second-hand 18th century that of a hero starting up among the artificial pasteboard figures and productions in the guise of a Robert Burns. Like a little well in the rocky desert places, like a sudden splendour of heaven in the artificial Vauxhall, people knew not what to make of him. They took it for a piece of Vauxhall firework. Alas, it let itself so be taken, though struggling half blindly as in bitterness of death against that. Perhaps no man had such a false reception from his fellow men. Once more, a very wasteful life drama was enacted under the sun. The tragedy of Burns's life is known to all of you. Surely we must say, if discrepancy between place held and place merited constitute perverseness of lot for a man, no lot could be more perverse than Burns. Among those second-hand acting figures, memes, for most part of the 18th century, once more a giant original man. One of those men who reach down to the perennial deeps, who take rank with the heroic among men. And he was born in a poor Ayrshire hut. The largest soul of all the British lands came among us in the shape of a hard-handed Scottish peasant. His father, a poor toiling man, tried various things, did not succeed in any, was involved in continual difficulties. The steward, factor, Scotch call him, used to send letters and threatenings, Burns says, which drew us all into tears. The brave, hard-toiling, hard-suffering father, his brave heroine of a wife, and those children of whom Robert was one. In this earth so wide, otherwise no shelter for them. The letters threw us all into tears, figure it. The brave father, I say always. a silent hero and poet, without whom the sun had never been a speaking one. Burns's schoolmaster came afterwards to London, learned what good society was, but declares that in no meeting of men did he ever enjoy better discourse than at the hearth of this peasant. And his poor 7 acres of nursery ground, not that, nor the miserable patch of clay form, nor anything he tried to get a living by, would prosper with him. He had a sore, unequal battle all his days, but he stood to it valiantly. A wise, faithful, unconquerable man, in short, swallowing down how many sore sufferings daily into silence, fighting like an unseen hero, nobody publishing newspaper paragraphs about his nobleness, voting pieces of plate to him. However, he was not lost. Nothing is lost. Robert is there, the outcome of him, and indeed of many generations such as him. The Burns and peered under every disadvantage, uninstructed, poor, born only to a hard manual toil, writing, when it came to that, in a rustic, special dialect, known only to small province of the country he lived in. Had he written, even what he did write, in the general language of England, I doubt not he had already become universally recognized as being or capable to be one of the greatest men. That he should have tempted so many to penetrate through the rust husk of that dialect of his proof that there lay something far from common within it. He has gained a certain recognition, and is continuing to do so for all quarters of the Saxon world. Wheresoever Saxon dialect is spoken, it begins to be understood by personal inspection of this and the other, and one of the most considerable Saxon men of the 18th century was an Ayrshire peasant named Robert Burns. Yes, I will say, here too was a piece of the right Saxon stuff. Strong as the Harz rock, root of the depths of the world, rock yet within the wells of the living softness in it. A wild, impetuous whirlwind of passion and faculty slumbered quiet there. Such heavenly melody dwelling in the heart of it. A noble, homely, rustic, honest, true simplicity of strength, with its lightning fire, its soft, dewy pity, like the old Norse Thor, the peasant god. Burns's brother, Gilbert, a man such of this sense and worth, has told me that Robert, in his young days, in spite of their hardship, was usually the gayest of speech. A fellow of infinite frolic, laughter, sense of heart. Far pleasanter to hear their script-cutting peats in the bog or such like than he afterwards knew 'em. I can well believe it. This basis of mirth, Galliard, as the old Marquis Mirabeau calls it, a primal element of sunshine and joyfulness, coupled with his other deep and earnest qualities, is one of the most attractive characteristics of Burns. A large fund of hope dwells in him, spite of his tragical history. He is not a mourning man. He shakes his sorrows gallantly aside, bounds forth victorious over them. It is as the lion shaking dewdrops from his mane, as the swift bounding horse that laughs at the shaking of the spear. But indeed, hope, mirth, and the sort like Burns, are they not the outcome properly of warm, generous affection? Of such as the beginning of all to every man? You would think it's strange if I called Burns the most gifted British soul we had in all that century of his, and yet I believe the day is coming where there'll be little danger in saying so. His writings, all that he did under such obstructions, are only a poor fragment of him. Professor Stewart remarked very justly, what indeed is true of all poets, good for much, that his poetry was not any particular faculty, but in general result of naturally vigorous, original mind expressing itself in that way. Burns's gifts, expressed in conversation, are the theme of all that ever heard him. All kinds of gifts, from the gracefulest utterances of courtesy to the highest fire of passionate speech, loud floods of mirth, soft wailings of affection, laconic emphasis, clear piercing insight, all was in him. Witty duchesses celebrate him as a man whose speech led them off their feet. This is beautiful. But still more beautiful, that which Mr. Lockhart has recorded, which I have more than once alluded to, how the waiters and ostlers at inns would get out of bed and come crowing and crowding to hear this man speak. Waiters and ostlers, they too were men, and here was a man. I have heard much about his speech, but one of the best things I have ever heard of it was, last year, from a venerable gentleman long familiar with him, that it was speech distinguished by always having something in it. He spoke rather little than much, this old man told me, sat rather silent in those early days as in the company of persons above him, and always when he did speak it was to throw new light on the matter. I know not why anyone should speak otherwise. If we look at this general force of soul, his healthy robustness in every way, the rugged downrightness, penetration, generous valour and manfulness that was in him, where shall we readily find a better gifted man? Among the great men of the 18th century, I sometimes feel as if Burns might be found to resemble Mirabeau more than any other. They differ widely in vesture, yet look at them intrinsically. There is the same burly, thick-necked strength of body as of soul, built, in those cases, on what the old Marquis calls a fond gaillard. By nature, by course of breeding, indeed by nation, Mirabeau has much more of bluster, a noisy, forward, unresting man. But the characteristics of Mirabeau, too, is veracity, sense of power, true insight, superiority of vision. This thing that he says is worth remembering. It is a flash of insight into some object or other. So do both these men speak. Same raging passions capable too in both manifesting themselves as the tenderest noble affections, wit, wild laughter, energy, directness, sincerity. These were in both. The types of two men were not dissimilar. Burns, too, could have governed, debated in national assemblies, politicized as few could. Alas, the courage which had to exhibit itself in the capture of smuggling schooners in the Solway Firth. Keeping silence over so much were no good speech, but only inarticulate rage was possible. That might have bellowed forth ushers de braise and the like, and made itself visible to all men, in managing of kingdoms, in ruling of great ever memorable epochs. But they said to him reprovingly, his official superior said, and wrote, "You are to work, not think. Of your thinking faculty, the greatest in this land, we have no need. You are to gauge beer there. For that only are you wanted." Very notable. And worth mentioning, though we know that it, what is to be said and answered, as if thought, power, thinking were not at all times, in all places and situations of the world, precisely the thing that was wanted. The fatal man, is he not always the unthinking man? The man who cannot think and see, but only grope and hallucinate and missay the nature of the things he works with. He missees it and mistakes it, as we say, takes it for one thing, and it is another thing, and leaves him standing like a futility there. He is the fatal man, unutterably fatal, put in the high places of men. Why complain of this? Say some. Strength is mournfully denied its arena. That was true from of old. Doubtless, and the worse for the arena, answer I. Complaining profits little. Stating the truth may profit. That a Europe with its French Revolution just breaking out finds no need of a Burns except for gauging beer is a thing I, for one, cannot rejoice at. Once more we have to say here that the chief quality of Burns is the sincerity of him. So in his poetry, so in his life. The song he sings is not of fantasticalities. It is one of a thing felt really there. The prime merit of it, as of all in him, and of his life generally, is truth. The life of Burns is what we may call a great tragic sincerity, a sort of savage sincerity, not cruel, not far from that, but wild, wrestling, naked with the truth of things. In that sense there is something of the savage in all great men. Hero worship. Odin, Burns. Well, these men of letters, too, are not without a kind of hero worship. What a strange condition has got into now. The waiters and ostlers of Scotch inns, prying at the door, eager to catch any word that fell from Burns, were doing unconscious reverence to the heroic Johnson, had his Boswell for worshipper. Rousseau had his worshippers enough, princes calling on him in his mean garret, the great, the beautiful doing reverence to the poor moonstruck man. For himself, a most portentous contradiction, the two ends of his life not to be brought into harmony. He sits at the tables of grandees and has copy music for his own living. He cannot even get his music copied. By dint of dining out, says he, I run the risk of dying by starvation at home. For this worshippers, too, a most questionable thing. If doing hero worship well or badly by the test of vital well-being or ill-being to a generation, can we say that these generations are very first-rate? And yet our heroic men of letters do teach, govern, our kings, priests, or what you like to call them. Intrinsically there is no preventing it, by any means whatever. The world has to obey him who thinks and sees in the world. The world can alter the manner of that. Can either have it as blessed continuous summer sunshine, or as unblessed black thunder and tornado, with unspeakable difference of profit for the world. The manner of it, very alterable. The manner of the fact of it is not alterable by any power under the sky. Light, or failing that, lightning. The world can take its choice. Not whether we call an Odin god, prophet, priest, or what we call him, but whether we believe the word he tells us. There it all lies. If it be a true word, he shall have to be believed. And believing it, we shall have to do it. What name or welcome we give him or it, as a point that concerns ourselves mainly. It, the new truth, new deeper revealing of the secret of the universe, is verily of the nature of a message from on high, and must and will have itself obeyed. And my last remark is on the notablest phases of Burns' history, his visit to Edinburgh. Often it seems to me as if his demeanour there was the highest proof he gave of what a fund of worth and genuine manhood was in him. If we think of it, few heavier burdens could be laid on the strength of a man. So sudden, all common lionism which ruins innumerable men was as nothing to this. It is as if Napoleon had been made a king of, not gradually, but at once, from the artillery lieutenancy in the regiment Lefebvre. Burns, still only in his 27th year, no longer even a ploughman, he is flying to the West Indies to escape the disgrace in a jail. This month, he is a ruined peasant. His wages, £7 a year, and these gone from him. Next month he is in the blaze of rank and beauty, handing down jewelled duchesses to dinner, and cynicism of all eyes. Adversity is sometimes hard upon a man, but for one man who can stand prosperity, there are 100 that will stand adversity. I admire such much the way in which Burns met all this. Perhaps no man could point out was ever so sorely tired and so little forgot himself, tranquil, unastonished, not abashed, but inflated. Not inflated, but neither awkwardness nor affectation. He feels that there is the man, Robert Burns, that the rank is but a guinea stamp. The celebrity is but a candlelight, which will show what man, not in the least make him a better or other man. Alas, it may readily, unless he lack to it, make him a worse man, a wretched, inflated windbag, inflated till he burst, and yet become dead lion, for whom, as someone has said, there is no resurrection of the body. Worse than a living dog. Burns is admirable here. Yet, alas, as I have observed elsewhere, these lion hunters were to ruin and be the death of Burns. It was they that rendered it impossible for him to live. They gathered round him in his farm, hindered his industry. No place was remote enough for them. He could not get his Lionism forgotten, honestly as he was disposed to do. He falls into discontents, into miseries, faults, the world getting ever more desolate for him. Health, character, peace of mind, all gone. Solitary enough now. It is tragical to think of. These men came to see him, but it was out of no sympathy with him, nor no hatred to him. They came to get a little amusement. Yeah, they got their amusement, and the hero's life went for it. Richter says in the island of Sumatra there is a kind of a light chafers, large fireflies which people stick upon spits and illumine the ways with at night. Well, persons of condition can thus travel with a pleasant radiance, which they much admire. A great honour to the fireflies. But